Physical activity not only benefits our bodies, it's great for our mental and emotional well being too. Being physically active releases chemicals in our brains that make us feel good, boosting self esteem, increasing concentration, and improving sleep quality, as well as giving us an overall sense of well being. Welcome to UT Health San Antonio Wellbeing Wisdom Podcast, a dose of learning for healthier, happier lives, brought to you by the Office of Human Resources. I am your host, Laura Gottlieb, and our topic today is Get Moving, the physical and psychological benefits of exercise. We are joined today by a very special guest, Dr. Austin Lemke, a clinical psychologist and assistant professor at UT Health San Antonio. Dr. Lemke serves as the lead clinician for the First Responder Counseling Services Program, and he is the trauma therapy coordinator for the New Opportunities for Wellness Clinic, otherwise known as the NOW Clinic. As a licensed psychologist, Dr. Lemke has wide-ranging expertise treating people with anxiety, depression, PTSD, and substance use. Dr. Lemke earned a doctorate in clinical psychology from Wheaton College and completed both his internship and postdoctoral fellowship in the South Texas Veterans Healthcare System. Dr. Lemke has authored and co-authored research published in academic journals on suicide risk, religion and spirituality, anxiety, and finding strength during difficult circumstances. Welcome, Dr. Lemke. We're grateful you're here with us today to share your well-being wisdom on the benefits of exercise to our overall well-being. Thank you again for joining us, Dr. Lemke. Please tell us a little bit about yourself and your professional journey.
I work at UT Health leading our first responder counseling service. And in terms of what brought me here, I got my master's from LSU and my doctorate from Wheaton College up in the Chicago area. And while I was at Wheaton, I developed an interest in working with veterans through a rotation at the VA and in particular, veterans with PTSD or histories of traumatic experiences. And I learned that that was a group of folks presenting issue that I really enjoyed and found a lot of value in working with. I completed my internship and postdoctoral fellowship at the South Texas VA here in San Antonio, and then started up at UT Health with our first responder counseling service. This idea of exercise, and especially exercise as a wellness strategy, is something that's been really prevalent and really important to the folks that I've worked with. And it's also been a really important aspect of my own self-care. I grew up playing a lot of sports and still do that when I find time, and I enjoy watching sports too. And so I'm excited to talk about the benefits of exercise with you.
We really genuinely appreciate the work that you do living in Military City, USA. I come from a family of servicemen and women and
Mm.
also first responders. So I've seen firsthand the benefits of great mental health and well-being care, and really appreciate your passion for this work and also making the connection between physical wellness and mental well-being as well. So thank you for all of that. Since our topic today is about the physical and psychological benefits of exercise, I'm curious, how does regular movement influence mental and emotional health beyond the obvious physical benefits?
Yeah. It's interesting. There has actually been a lot of research out there that shows that regular exercise can have about the same effect on a lot of areas of well-being, particularly depression and anxiety, that's just as effective as going to therapy or taking a round of an antidepressant medication. And there's a lot of reasons for that. For one, exercise helps boost production of a lot of the kind of reward hormones in our brain. It can help lower cortisol, which helps reduce stress. It's it's good for our sleep. There's a lot of links between regular exercise and improved sleep regularity and sleep quality. It's also a practice that has a lot of components of mindfulness to it. You know, people often think of specific types of exercise like yoga as being very tied to mindfulness, but you can really draw a link between just about any form of exercise and the benefits that we would expect to get from mindfulness. Along with that, it's a good way of kind of intentionally being kind to ourselves and choosing to take care of ourselves, and can also be a really good way to give ourselves a sense of kind of boosted self-esteem, satisfaction, and accomplishment that can be really good for our day-to-day well-being.
So it just occurred to me, we're energetic and we're chemical beings, and there's a lot of positive, I guess, effects triggered by movement, exercise, being physical. And I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about what's happening in the brain and body during exercise that contributes to this improved mood and perhaps even a reduction in anxiety.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, there's really strong links between regular exercise and a lot of the same types of hormones and endorphins that we see in antidepressant medications. Boosts in dopamine, which is like our reward hormone in our brain, serotonin that has a lot to do with our like emotion regulation, sense of well-being, sleep regulation, norepinephrine, which gives us that sense of kind of energy and drive. But one that's really interesting to me that is really strongly tied to exercise is something called brain-derived neurotropic factor, or BDNF, which when our brain is producing more of that, it's more able to kind of form new connections and to increase what we call neuroplasticity, which is our brain's ability to kind of adapt to new circumstances, new ways of thinking, and new ways of being. It's through that that exercise gives us kind of a boost in our kind of mental clarity, a boost in being able to kind of adapt and change the way that we think about things. And it's actually one of the main factors tied in preventing different forms of dementia, especially Alzheimer's. And so it's really good for both our short term and our long term mental clarity and sharpness as well.
That's amazing, and it makes perfect sense to me. I have a background in somatic learning, and oftentimes, if you're in one of my classes, I'll have participants engage in what I call physical process. And when they leave, they remember what we discussed and learned together
Mhm.
because they've embodied it. And so, kind of what I'm hearing from you is you get these good chemical reactions in the body, but then you also get these new neural networks being built and this neuroplasticity. And so, there is this brain body connection where it's sort of a mutually beneficial relationship, and that the more you move your body, the better your brain and the way you think, your clarity and emotions are going to operate as well. So it's looking at the whole person instead of just, their physical well-being or their mental well-being. It's interconnected is what I'm gathering.
Yeah, very much so. Our brain and our body are very much a two-way street, and I'm glad that a lot of kind of the newer mental health approaches take what we call, you know, this holistic or whole person approach that acknowledges that, yeah, essentially when our brain feels good, our body feels good, and vice versa. And so taking care of our body, we're seeing more and more through research and practice, is one of the best ways of taking care of our brain and our own well-being.
With all these great benefits, why do so many of us struggle to make regular exercise a habit? And what kinds of psychological barriers are at play here, and how can we overcome them?
Yeah, there's a lot of things that can become barriers to starting up doing anything new, especially something like exercise. There's, for one thing, essentially our brains like what they're used to. It's this idea that we call exposure bias, where our brain wants to kind of stay in the routine, the habit, the place and space that it's already at, even if it's not very good for us. And especially for something that can have so much complexity or so many different forms as exercise, it can be pretty overwhelming for people who either haven't exercised in quite a while or have never exercised to start up a routine of it. It's among the different types of strategies that I work with my clients on. Exercise can be one of the ones that's kind of hardest to get from step 0 to step 1. But then once they get the habit started and notice the benefits of it, notice how good it makes them feel, then it's one of the easiest to start getting consistent with and kind of get from step 2 to step 5 on. A lot of it goes back to the fact that when we know that we're going to be doing something that, is going to take some effort, is going to take some output, especially if it's something that we haven't been in the habit of doing, essentially our brains don't want to do it. But then once we feel the benefit of it, it's easier to draw on that benefit at the end to get ourselves back into it the next time. And so there's a lot of ways to recognize what could be a barrier for yourself. For some people it's finding the time to do it. For other people it's the kind of negative comparisons between how they used to work out, what they used to be able to do versus what they're able to do now. And so it's kind of recognizing what those barriers are going to be and finding ways to kind of work ahead of yourself in order to get past them. So like for me, one of the barriers has been just kind of knowing what to do, knowing what, the plan is going to be, what the program is going to be. And so joining a group gym that there's kind of a regular time. You show up at the time of the class. You don't have to worry about what you're going to do or how long you're going to do it or kind of how many repetitions of it is enough. Not kind of taking that decision making component out of it has been really good for me. I'm curious for you, what have been your ways of kind of getting consistent and staying consistent with exercise?
Yeah, I'm smiling because I think about a group class that I had joined and was with for a long time. And I loved it because it took the thinking out of it, the complexity out of it. I just had to show up, and there was a coach there that ran us through exercises, and the music was playing loud enough where it drowned out my, negative self-talk about, breathing too hard or, not being as good as somebody else in the class or whatever it was. And then the class was an hour, it was over and done. And, I felt terrific afterwards. And, it was one of those things where it was appointment based. So I made an appointment. And so I kept the appointment, and that helped with the consistency. And it occurred to me there's some other little tricks I've had to play on myself that have worked really great, like having sneakers right by my bedside. So when I get up in the
Hmm.
morning, I pull them right on and I go to it before I engage in anything else, because it's very easy to do other things in the morning, which will burn up time and maybe not the best investment of time. I know a lot of people are trying to break other habits to start new habits like scrolling on their phone. And so maybe one way to do that is put your phone farther away from your bedside, put your sneakers next to your bedside. So yeah, I've used all those tricks. What I really appreciate about you, Dr. Lemke, is you've normalized this, and I don't feel bad about, having that challenge between going from 0 to step 1. And I think, hopefully this will be encouraging to our listeners that once you take that first step, there is such a benefit from movement and physical activity that you're going to want to keep going. And so the hardest part often is that first step. And so you've given us some really good ideas on how to overcome that. So thank you.
Yeah.
So the work that you do is such important work. As you mentioned, you've got veterans and first responders and people who have experienced real trauma and depression, anxiety, and burnout. And I'm wondering if movement can serve as a complementary tool or even a primary intervention for people who are dealing with these very real challenges.
For each of these different things you mentioned, for trauma, depression, anxiety, workout, working out or exercising can have a very positive benefit on each of them, and often is a part of a treatment plan for any of them. But it does that for in very different ways and for very different reasons. So for depression, one of the things that we work on a lot of the time is scheduling and following through with different exercises that are or different practices that are positive and will and help people kind of get out of that rut of depression essentially. And the types of activities that I tend to recommend are things that get people out of the house, get people moving in some way, get people around other people, and to start doing things that are connected to a sense of accomplishment or to their values. And one of the really great things about exercise is that for a lot of people, it checks all of those boxes. Um, people, even if someone's just kind of getting out to walk their dog with their partner, they're getting out of the house, they're moving, they are connected to they're connecting with their partner, like just through the conversations they're having while walking. And they're connecting to their value of taking care of themselves, of connecting to someone close to them, and of taking care of their dog. And so it's a really comprehensive way to practice a lot of the self-care that we look for in terms of recovering from depression. In terms of PTSD or trauma reactions, we one of the main effects or difficulties that people will go through with trauma is being pulled out of the present moment and being disconnected or feeling disconnected from their physical bodies. And exercise is a really powerful tool, A, for bringing people back into the present moment and kind of helping them focus on the here and now, kind of practicing mindfulness in a focused way. And also, it's a very good way to pay attention to and intentionally take care of your own physical body. And so it serves as a really powerful tool just to kind of get reconnected in general, get connected to the moment and get connected to your body in a positive way that reinforces taking care of yourself. In terms of anxiety, it is a really powerful tool for helping people um, learn to tolerate distress or learn to better cope with a lot of the physical reactions that people struggle with so frequently in anxiety. A lot of times people who experience a lot of anxiety really struggle with things like it feeling like their heart's beating out of their chest, shortness of breath, sweatiness, and those reactions can feel really overwhelming or even kind of dangerous. And exercise normalizes those reactions for us and even helps us connect them to a sense of kind of doing something positive for ourselves or a sense of accomplishment. And so it serves as a really powerful, essentially an exposure to these different feelings to help people kind of normalize and approach them in a different way. So it's beneficial in all these different areas in a very multifaceted way for each issue.
Yeah, this is amazing because what I'm hearing is there are many boxes that are checked by physical exercise. It brings you into the present moment. You're not ruminating on the past or worrying about the future when you're in the here and now. And exercise kind of brings that to the forefront of one's experience. But then also to really your description of anxiety, I love that because that's how I feel when I go running.
Mhm.
My heart's pounding and I have difficulty breathing sometimes. And so I can see where by having the experience of running and also surviving it and having my breathing return to normal could be very helpful for someone who is, having a panic attack or dealing with anxiety. So I can see where that could be a very helpful experience. And yeah, it's almost like creating this virtuous cycle or upward spiral where there are so many good benefits from it for multiple reasons, multiple challenges. And, I think one thing that, I'm curious about is, can it be used in the moment to help self regulate emotions like anger or sadness, frustration in healthy ways? And I'm wondering if there are ways we can incorporate exercise to kind of help us manage our feelings as we're feeling them.
Yeah, it can certainly be a great in the moment coping tool. And again, it can help us cope in different ways with different issues. So, like for feeling anxious, angry, frustrated, which are feelings that a lot of the first responders that I work with really struggle with, these kind of like overwhelming, high energy, kind of high activation feelings. um, Exercise can be a really good way to kind of express those feelings and work through the physical reactions that come with them in a much healthier way. One of the things that makes anxiety, frustration, and anger really difficult to deal with is that it activates our sympathetic nervous system and activates kind of all of these like high energy feelings and high energy reactions that want to have somewhere to go. And it can be really hard to manage or regulate them when there's nowhere for kind of all of this energy and all of these reactions to go. And so exercise can be a really good outlet for that, and that gives them a positive and productive way to express that. So I'll work with a lot of folks who, when they get off of a really difficult shift and they're feeling really, just a lot of pent up frustration, a lot of pent up anxiety, they'll go for a run or lift weights or, whatever it might be, or go swimming as a way to kind of work through that energy in a calming and satisfying way rather than just kind of sitting with it the rest of the day. For other reactions like sadness, it's a really good tool to kind of get yourself out of the rut that can come with the sadness that's often related to depression. When we're feeling down, when we're feeling depressed, it kind of all we want to do is kind of we have that low energy feeling and we want to kind of isolate and lie down and not do very much. And a lot of time that turns into kind of more isolation, more of the down feelings because we're not doing what we need to do to take care of ourselves. And so in that instance, or not depression, exercise forms a really powerful therapeutic tool that I use that's called opposite action. That's essentially just doing the opposite of what the depression's telling you to do. And rather than isolating, getting up and moving. And through those positive effects we talked about earlier, through the kind of changes in brain chemistry, the positive effect of just changing your scenery, it can help you kind of turn that negatively reinforcing cycle into a positive one.
I love this idea of leaning into opposite action, kind of getting ourselves out of a rut and trying something new and different. It's as if it's interrupting a pattern, an unhealthy pattern with something that could develop into a healthy pattern. So that opposite action, that's going to stay with me. That's a great term. Appreciate that. Okay, so I am wondering, it's really hard when, especially, and I've gone in and out of being active and inactive. And for our listeners that may be feeling inactive and maybe overwhelmed by the idea of starting anything new in the way of exercise, what would be a realistic first step to start reaping the physical and psychological benefits of movement?
Yeah, I think it's just, you know, I often talk to folks I work with about just kind of taking one step in the right direction. It doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be the end goal right away. It doesn't have to be, diving fully into the workout program right at the very beginning. It's just doing a little bit more a little bit more this week than you did last week. And so we'll start with, setting a goal that's feasible based on kind of where they're at right now. So if it's, if they're not working out at all, it's, getting out and exercising 1 or 2 times this week. If they're already doing it a couple times but wanting to do more, it's adding a little bit to it. And and like we talked about earlier, it's a lot of kind of recognizing what the barriers can be and kind of planning in advance to get ahead of them. And actually, one of the best strategies that I've seen for this is scheduling it and then I say kind of treat it like a work meeting or treat it like a doctor's appointment. Like all these things that we never let ourselves down on because we feel that kind of sense of responsibility to it. Give that the Take the same mindset to that where you're kind of making an appointment with yourself to do that, or even making an appointment, literally making an appointment with someone else so that you'll have that accountability for it. And then just show up and get started and do what feels right in that moment, not knowing that it doesn't have to be any certain thing. With getting started exercising, kind of having certain expectations or making certain comparisons can be one of the main barriers to getting started, whether it's comparisons to kind of the way that we used to work out when we were in better shape or before injuries or just when we were younger, or kind of comparing ourselves to other people in the gym who have been doing it for quite a while. It can be really helpful just to um, be mindful of those and to practice self-compassion in terms of kind of recognizing where we're at and not feeling like we have to force ourselves to be somewhere we're not.
Yeah, I love your word self-compassion. And I think there's a lot of wisdom in what you're recommending in terms of time blocking. I think it works for other things. Why wouldn't it work for making time for exercise and self-care? And you touched on something that I think will close with this idea of scheduling time with other people and how that can help hold us accountable to our goals to introduce a little more exercise and movement into our daily lives. And so I'm wondering, what role does group exercise or movement in community settings play in strengthening our resilience as well as our overall sense of well-being?
Yeah, it's um, group exercise can be really, really positive for a lot of people and can add to a lot of the positive benefits that we see from exercise. It can be, in some ways, it can be kind of a double-edged sword where for some people, like I mentioned with the comparisons to other people or being very, self-conscious about getting started, it can be kind of a more difficult place to start for some people. But for a lot of people, doing it with other people can add to the benefits of it and help people really get into the habit and routine practice of exercise. So for myself, um, I started joining a group exercise class, which I had never really done before, just because I moved near a place that did group exercise classes, and and joined it just because it was what was nearby. And my approach to exercise is the best workout for you is the one that you don't have an excuse not to do. And at the time, I was really stressed about coming into a group exercise environment, was worried about like slowing things down or getting in other people's way, and kind of had all these coping strategies for making sure I wasn't kind of causing problems for other people. Like I would wait and kind of set up my equipment after everyone else had already set up theirs, so I knew I wasn't like taking someone's favorite bar or favorite rack. If I was even a minute late, I wouldn't go because I didn't want to slow things down. And so kind of all these different ways that I felt like I kind of had to accommodate the anxiety surrounding starting it. But once I kind of got there, got comfortable, got to know everyone, it became one of the best parts of the workout in that, they gave, it gave kind of a sense of encouragement and maybe even some like friendly competition in terms of kind of pushing myself
Yeah.
to do a little bit better, push myself a little bit harder.
Mhm.
Gave a sense of accountability in terms of, if I didn't go on a regular day, people would be like, "Hey, where are you at? Where'd you go?" And then also actually was, as I was kind of learning new exercise practices, gave gave me people who were very willing teachers to help me improve in what I was doing. And so kind of the thing that I had to kind of overcome to get into it became one of the things that has kind of kept kept me in it and kept me consistent with it. And I'm curious for you, is that have you used kind of the social aspect of it or group exercise and how you've approached your exercises?
I have both the group exercise programs offered at a gym setting and also a running group that I was part of for many years, and I almost want to say decades. It was a running group where we would meet up very, very early in the morning. And because of that, I didn't want to let my running friends down by being a no-show because, we're running in the dark, safety in numbers.
Hmm.
And so, it was one of those things where it held me accountable to keep showing up. And then we set goals as a group. We set a goal to start marathoning. We wanted to do qualifiers for the Boston Marathon. And then ultimately, some of us qualified and were able to run it. And so, yeah, having that group experience was wonderful. And the social aspect, this is where you were talking earlier about checking more than one box. The social aspect, it was largely a group of women, and we were all sort of young mothers. And what that did for us is helped us support each other through other aspects of life as well. And so we would share stories of our experiences of mothering and all of that. And so there were multiple benefits, and those friendships they ran deep and are
Yeah.
still there today, even though many of us have moved on in life and even to different states in the country and all of that. We're still connected through that shared experience. And so, and it's interesting because you said one thing that really struck me earlier, that when people are depressed, they will self isolate.
Hmm.
And we could always tell when one of our running friends, quit showing up. That was a sign that we need to reach out to them, that there was something going on, and it was almost always true. And so it helped us create a support system for each other and really promote each other's well-being. So thank you for asking that, Dr. Lemke. I
Yeah.
appreciate your question as well. So usually I'm the one interviewing guests. So thank you for asking.
Yeah, absolutely. And you saying that brings up another way that I've noticed that exercise can be really positive for people that, I work with, a lot of firefighters, police officers, and a lot of veterans. And um and a lot of the kind of struggle socially for a lot of folks and especially a lot of men is that we are less likely to kind of be social by like meeting up and getting coffee and just kind of like chatting about things. And and there's this idea that kind of women connect face to face and women and men connect side by side or shoulder to shoulder. And it's kind of a stereotype and an overgeneralization, but I think there is some truth to it, where a lot of the folks who I have worked with who have struggled to who have struggled to get social have ultimately done it through exercise because it kind of gives that shared goal, that shared thing that you're working towards. And while you're doing that, you're not just talking about the exercise. You're talking about life. You're giving each other support. When someone's going through something tough, and it kind of gives that avenue to build and grow relationships in a really positive way.
I'm smiling from ear to ear right now, just hearing about all these positive benefits. I've experienced them myself. I love hearing your stories and your experiences personally and professionally, advising and counseling others. I think what I'm hearing is the more you move, the better you'll feel due to the plethora of positive effects on our overall well being, including our physiological and psychological well being. And so I really want to genuinely thank you, Dr. Lemke, for joining our podcast today and for making lives better by sharing your well-being wisdom. I'm going to invite you all to tune in next time when we're going to explore the wonder of nature. Until then, take good care.